bringing a student to have the awareness of what is the purpose of what they do, other than please, from early childhood foremost for parents and teachers, and keep doing it because of a trade which, with the years and the practice, becomes cognitively better, is not enough. You have to put meaning into what you do. So how do you do that? To bring a student to the awareness of, that is one of my great guidelines, to become not only a well-informed, because that you do by taking classes, reading articles and books, absorbing the experience of the preceding generations in a nutshell, but mostly about finding the meaning of one's own contribution to it. It doesn't have to do with humility or arrogance. It has to do with the purpose, and therefore the conviction. How will I play this grace note? How will I understand how much I need to do in the transition ritenuto in order to reach the next tempo? And do I need to change tempo or not for when I change character? And of course, we are told rules. No, yes. Obey. Follow the score. The teachers enforce the score, which is our only scroll to the intent of the dead composers who are so alive when we play them that we enter in dialogue with them. It's like, how am I supposed to handle it? What does it mean? But in fact, these questions come only because we study them. In fact, by ear, by intuition, the students already know, hear, feel, have already a certain, depending on the composer's music world which they serve. If it is a composer whose language is foreign, it's like a language barrier in real life when you try to understand the poetry of a foreign country. Some things have to be understood once you know the language. You cannot translate all innuendos. And that's the beauty and the subtlety and the characteristic of languages and therefore cultures and therefore times past that are present by their individual presence with us, as if time is abolished if the topics are eternal. And so we enter in a reflection with our predecessors on earth about what they understood or we think they misunderstood, and therefore in interpretation of music, so commonly people say it's not supposed to be played that way, or the others don't know how to play it or teach it or hear it or expect it, and I will tell you, teach you, make you understand. And this kind of conviction is very healthy when the identification with the work corresponds to the admiration you carry for the person who basically carries the work on their own soulful shoulders. And it's not about blind admiration. It's also about trust. And trust implies some level of acceptance, I would say admiration, to an extent to which today is different because most of the young students are already aware of so many different interpretations that they have on their fingertips to hear or watch, that to summarize it, to filter it, to understand it, to beyond the passionate desire to imitate, if it's appealing to do because somebody else did a way that is not the way that others do, and or the teacher says. So yes, the teaching today is more relative than the absolute trust admiration between pupil and teacher from the past, at least in my youth. And that is already the past, because it's half a century ago that I studied with legendary teachers. But I think that the essence of the music remains how we approach it, with our conviction, our humility, and the meaning that we put into it. Not that we need to put narrative meaning to everything. Of course, we could put imaginary, even silly lyrics to, of course, music for instrument that has no text, in order to find the natural flow of the text. I mean, if it's subdivided in slow tempi to make an arched phrase, is less intuitive than if you play it in the moderato phrase, where you see the structure of the phrase. Just like when I speak at a certain speed, I don't speak in the other speed. And so it's not about a tempo and an indication and an objective opinion about what Meltzer's metronome established per beats per minute, which composers, when they did mark, are not always followed by the performers, because after all, the pace implies the articulation, which implies the quality of the legato or the non-legato or the voicing and the layering, and therefore it's a whole universe that you create out of the same piece, which can mean so differently to so many different people, even with tiny differences in terms of subtle innuendos, which in a way are the reflection of life itself. And so the elegance of a tempo, the lightness of the touch for articulation of certain... In fact, you could teach by example, which is the easiest way. I play and I say, this is how I like it, or this is how I got to understand it, or this is what brought me to conclude that this piece should be played this way because I tried this, I failed that, I've been there for 5 decades with this piece before you, and you arrive as a young student with your drive, intuition, and I listen to it. And so in this exchange between my experience and intuition combined, and theirs, which is nascent, since it's the first encounter with the piece, which will follow through their life many options of rethinking the paradigm. It's healthy and it's enriching, but you have to remain convicted with convictions, but not rigid with exceptions, and not agree to rethink the status quo of what you think you have reached as a conclusion of how it's supposed to be. It's a very subtle thing to do when you teach, because you have to, by authority of your trade, not authoritarianism, bring the answer that the student is seeking with you, and tomorrow with another one, and so on, until they form their own conclusion of what they're supposed to do with this piece. I find it very necessary to keep open-minded, and at the same time always refer to the score, the text. Not that it gives all the answers, but analytical clues can lead us to choices for interpretation, which should not be disconnected from our emotion, our intuition, the way we feel about it, because only playing by feeling and ear is a plateau, and only playing analytically does not connect really to the text. It on the surface it does, but in fact not in the meaning. You can recite the words, but you have to put meaning to them. Therefore, you have to choose which ones you will bring out and less others. And therefore, you have to make it either an intuitive, either a educated, either because it was taught choice of how you hierarchize the text and the texture which you play. I find it fascinating and every day renewed. Thank you.